everybody. Thank you for joining. This is the FVPSA ARP RFP webinar. Just to get started, I just want to ask everybody to check and make sure that you are muted. So this is going to be recorded and posted on our website. There will be a Q&A at the end, and there's also a chat box that you can put any questions in, and one of my coworkers, Ellen Sheets, is in the chat and will be helping answer questions as we go, and then we'll kind of address any unanswered questions or important questions at the end. So to access the RFP, it is on our website, cji.in.gov, and then the Victim Services tab. There's a FVPSA box. If you click the Learn More button, it'll pull up a page, and the RFP, the Request for Proposal button, will be on that page, and it'll pull up the PDF of the RFP for this FVPSA ARP application. And forward is right there. I'll give it a second for anybody that wants to write it down or take a screenshot or whatever. So the application opened Wednesday, July 15th at 9 a.m. and will close Wednesday, August 12th at 11:59 p.m. Applicants are strongly encouraged to submit applications 48 hours prior to the deadline. It gives us enough time if there's any issues with the application or if there's any questions that you may have. It gives us enough time to be able to get back to you or look into any issues that may come up. The award period for this application is October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2023. It's a 2-year award period. All projects should begin on October 1st, 2021 and be in operation no later than 60 days after this date. Failure to have the grant-funded project operational within 60 days will result in cancellation of the grant and deobligation of all awarded funds. The Family Violence Prevention Services the FVPSA grant program, and services, administration on children, youth, and families, and Family and Youth Services Bureau. The purpose of FVPSA funds is to provide shelter, temporary housing, supportive services, information, and assistance to adult and youth victims of family violence, domestic violence, or dating violence, as well as family and household members of such victims and persons affected by the victimization. The FVPSA program has received supplemental funding through the American Rescue Plan, or ARP. The purpose of these funds is to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. So it's similar to the FVPSA CARES from, I believe, last year, and kind of another go around of it, or similar to it. Funding eligibility. Entity types include state agencies, units of local government, nonprofit organizations, and faith-based organizations. And in order to be eligible for our funding, you need to have a registered DUNS number, active and current registration with sam.gov, and a good standing with the Department of Revenue and the Department of Workforce Development, along with the Secretary of State. And for the sam.gov, they recently updated the website as a whole. And if any of you are listed as private on that website, you will need to check and make sure that you are opted into the search authorization for sam.gov, or we are not able to locate your SAM registration, and it can hold up your funding. So it also takes about 10 days from the time that you do opt into that for us to be able to see it. So if you go ahead and do that now or ahead of time, it just kind of helps speed up the process later on. Required allocations for FVPSA. ICJI must ensure that no less than 70% of the funds distributed are used for the primary purpose of providing immediate shelter and supportive services to adult and youth victims of family violence, domestic violence, or dating violence and their dependents. and no less than 25% of funds will be used for the purpose of providing supportive services and prevention services. Funding availability. We have about $2.25 million for this grant award, and we're currently estimating around 35 to 40 awards in the amount of $10,000 to $60,000. The purpose areas for this funding. The purpose areas of the supplemental funds is to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. The activities that supported by these funds will be within these purpose areas. And so under prevent is activities under this purpose area will focus on the continued efforts to stop the spread of COVID-19, including emergency housing, hotels, motels, and safe houses, mobile advocacy, meeting platforms, and virtual platforms to provide services to victims. And for the mobile advocacy, it's not hardware, it's just the platforms or like the software for that category. For prepare, activities under this purpose will focus on preparing for any future surge or variant of COVID-19, including organizational planning. And then respond, activities under this purpose area will focus on victims and their children who have been affected by COVID-19 who could benefit from services and assistance to recover from this health crisis, which includes counseling, youth services, legal assistance, rental assistance, and transportation. And for other services, it includes contracted services for therapy for both individuals and groups. So this is pretty much anything that can be requested for on your applications. For initiating the application in IntelliGrants, you'll go to the intelligrants.in.gov and log into your account. If you don't have one, you'll click on, there's a new user link that you can click on to create your account and complete your registration. On the My Home page, you'll have a View Available Proposals and click on View Opportunities. And then this will lay out all open opportunities from CJI, and that will be where you find the 2021 FVPSA ARP grant application and click Apply Now. There had been a problem earlier this week with that application, so if you were having any issues with it, it should have been taken care of by now. So everyone should be able to locate and apply for this application. This is what the screen will look like for you. You'll have the View Available Proposals. You'll click that View Opportunities button, and then that's where it'll pull up that list of funds. And then the Forms menu. Once you start your application, this is the screen that you'll see. The Forms menu will be where you go to navigate through your application and get to each form to fill out each page for your application. These are all the forms that need to be completed: your contact, project information, programmatic information, problem statement and analysis, goals, objectives, and outcomes, program descriptions, evidence-based and best practices, use of volunteers, budget narrative, and attachments. And each of these is the heading for those forms under the Forms menu. And then this is just a little bit of information about each page. The contact page will just be the point of contact for your grant, the administrator, the fiscal agent, and the contact itself. And then your project information will include your SAM registration expiration date and any audit information for your agency. If you receive more than $750,000 in federal grant funds, you're required to have an audit, and this will be requested if CJI is aware that you receive more than $750,000. All government agencies audits are included in the county audit and should all have one attached. Programmatic information is information about your proposed grant. The goals, objectives, and outcomes. The goal should directly address the problem identified in the problem statement. Objectives are the steps needed to achieve a goal. They should be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely, or SMART. So they'll all have a measurable aspect to it. And then the outcomes measure the objectives and are the criteria for how the program is deemed to be effective. Program description is the who, what, when, where, and how of your program. And then you will have an evidence-based practice and use of volunteers form. All grants from the ICJI Victim Services are reimbursement grants, which means that agencies must first incur the expense prior to us reimbursing for the expense. Verification of expenses along with verification of payment of expenses must be provided to CJI on a monthly or quarterly basis prior to reimbursement. For this FVPSA ARP grant, there is no match requirement, so you will not have to provide any match in your budgets for your application. Unallowable costs, as part of your budget, this list is things that cannot be included in your budget, and it's administrative costs over 10% of the total grant budget, direct financial assistance to a client such as cash, gift cards, or checks, food and beverages, lobbying and or fundraising, immigration fees, purchase of real estate, construction, physical modification to buildings, including minor renovations, vehicles, and fuel. And then overtime is allowed, but to claim the increased rate, there must be a separate line item in the budget that includes the overtime rate of pay. For the budget narrative, please be sure all items in the budget are included in the budget narrative. And then please describe how each item pertains to your program or how it relates to either the prepare, prevent, or respond to COVID-19. Grant reviewers are not required to contact you for clarification. Any missing information in the section may disqualify that budget item for funding. So just be as thorough and detailed as possible for each item in your budget as it relates to your program. The following are the attachments that are required for your application, and that is the total agency budget, and it can be found at this link. The sustainability plan, the timeline, letters of endorsement, and then job descriptions for any position listed in personnel, any contracts if applicable, the consultation form, EEOP certification, and legal certification, or not the legal certification form, you can ignore that one. For technical assistance, contact the ICJI help desk at cjihelpdesk@cji.in.gov. Help desk hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30, except state holidays. ICJI is not responsible for technical issues with grant submission within 48 hours of the grant deadline. So that's why we strongly encourage everyone to submit it before that point or to get it completed before that point. So if there are any issues with the submission, that we have enough time to work with our IT to get it taken care of. For assistance with any other requirements of the solicitation, please contact the Victim Services Division at ICJI. Questions?
You haven't.
Is there any questions? Elaborate on what rental assistance can look like. Are there restrictions on how much or what circumstances qualify to use rental assistance under this grant? The client is in an apartment with their own lease but lost their job. Can we use rental assistance dollars to help with their rent until they find employment?
You may answer that, Max.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looked like you were already attempting to.
Yeah,
So
I was trying, but somehow I deleted most of my answers, so I might as well go ahead and restate it. So yes, rental assistance can be, can be paid for under this grant or provided under this grant. The main requirement would be that it would have to be paid by the agency first and directly to the landlord and no funds to the client. then you would be able to submit the documentation for reimbursement. The same documentation you would for any other invoice. We'd also need a copy of the person's rental agreement to show how much the rent was, as well as verification that the payment cleared your account.
Please elaborate on what personnel expenses can be included. Is shelter staff only or administrative too? So for this budget, I'm going to pull up the page. That prepare, prevent, respond, and everything that was included under that will be all that is allowable for this FVPSA ARP grant. And I'm pulling it back up real fast just so that.
There we go.
So anything that is under this page, the emergency housing, mobile advocacy, organizational planning, counseling, youth services, legal assistance, rental assistance, and transportation is all that will be allowable under this grant. So, and this is also laid out in the RFP. So please feel free to reference that when completing your application, but this will be. So for the personnel, so the counseling could be included, but for actual personnel time, it would have to relate to this in some way or another. I'll give it a second just for anybody that either reading it or wants to screenshot it or whatever.
And Max, as always, you'll have a copy of this on the CJI website, correct? A copy of your PowerPoint?
So I will put this recording and my PowerPoint both on our website, and it will all be located there so you can refer back to this at any point. Notice human trafficking survivors are not listed as a service population. Is this a non-allowable population? I don't know if I am aware of what you are referring to in the RFP. I don't remember seeing anything related to that. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Max, I'm pulling up the PowerPoint. I want to take a look at something real quick. See.
Yeah, go ahead.
So regarding the human trafficking question, I would refer you to the, Max, can you go to the required allocations?
Yes.
Page? And this is also discussed in the RFP. Please keep in mind that, each of our funding sources are focused on many of the same things, but they all have differences.
Was there something that you were specifically wanting from this page, or were you just wanting it?
No, I was just asking you to review it because You know, the human trafficking is not something covered under FVPSA. It's the 70% of the funds go to immediate shelter and supportive services to adult and youth victims of family violence, domestic violence, or dating violence and their dependents. Then 25% of the funds used for the purpose of providing supportive services and prevention services to those populations.
Let's see. Are there any other questions that anybody has about this? Just want to give it a minute in case anybody's typing out a question. If there are no more questions, that is all that I have. But if you guys still have questions, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have relating to the RFP.
All right, looks like that's about it, Max.
Yep.
Doesn't
All
seem
right.
like any more questions. As always, if there's any questions, you can reach out to me or Max, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you think of later.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great rest of the day.
Seriously?